Hey, this is Leif Gamford. I played the cash register thief in The Amazing Spider-Man, and you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, this is Rich McDonald, and I play Commander David Mason on Call of Duty Black Ops 2. And you're listening to Everything Geek podcast.
I am the last man standing survivor. I am the last man home.
Hello, I'm Simon Fisherbecker. You probably know me better as Dorian Moldovar from Doctor Who, or the Fat Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek Podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek podcast.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your host Ruari, and joining me is co-host Lawron.
Hello.
And also joining us today is a very special guest. We have composer Kevin Kiner, who is best known for being the composer for Star Wars The Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, CSI Miami, GoldenEye 007 video game, 10 episodes of Star Trek Enterprise, and 8 episodes of Stargate SG-1. So how are you, Kevin?
I'm very well. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you join us on the podcast. We're big fans of your work here.
Great. Glad to hear it. I heard a cue from the end of season 5 in your montage there. I heard one of my pieces of music.
I was wondering if you'd spot that.
Yeah. In fact, we're just compiling a CD. I think we're going to release a CD of the Clone Wars season 1 through 6 pretty soon, and that's on it.
Very cool. That's very nice. So I'll definitely be looking out for that then. That should be great. So getting right into the questions, my first question for you is, how did you first decide you wanted to get into music as a career?
Yeah, it's a bit of a long story. I grew up playing guitar. You know, my really early influences were like Led Zeppelin and Yes, experimental bands like that. And so I played a lot of guitar, from the time I was, say, 11 years old, and played a lot of rock, and then I got more into orchestration, and specifically in the early days, I got into doing arrangements for horn bands, because things like Earth, Wind, and Fire and Tower of Power were happening. So I started doing arrangements, and I went on the road with several different acts as their music director, and I was doing arrangements for them and conducting. This was when I was in my early 20s, maybe even 19 or 20 years old, and then I think it's kind of a natural progression to go from being an arranger to being a composer. So I got married. I decided to get off the road and stop conducting, stop being a music director for different road acts, and I started working in television and film. I got a couple of early breaks, and it just started. I think it started about 1983. I had my first television show on the air, and first feature film as well, I think in '84.
That's great. Yeah, very nice story. And especially as you're a first composer, I guess, it's great to hear, some of the insights into how you become a composer. So that's really cool. So my second question is, how did you first get involved in Star Wars: The Clone Wars?
Well, to this day, I don't really know how Dave Filoni and George Lucas got a hold of my demo CD. It was possibly through my agent or something. I nobody really knows, but they contacted me. I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe George was a kind of a fan of CSI Miami's music, and because we were doing a lot of electronica and interesting things, and I know he wanted to bring that kind of an element. He wanted to. George is always experimenting, and he wanted to push the music, I know, for the Clone Wars. I think that was always in his mind. So I think there were about 4 or 5 of us who auditioned for the gig. They gave us 10 minutes of footage from the first episode of Clone Wars, and we all went back and scored it however we saw fit, and I wound up getting the gig. So I was really proud of that, because I think my music spoke for me in that sense. It wasn't I wasn't really connected or anything to them at all, so that's kind of cool.
Definitely. And my third question, what were some of your favorite scores you did for the Clone Wars?
Well, I think Rhodia is a great one. The Plo Koon episodes. There were some clone episodes where I did a clone theme. I forget what those are called. I don't know the titles of all the shows. Even the first, when the feature that was released theatrically, I really enjoyed. I think some of my best music still is on that film and is in that soundtrack. Then later on, I think there was a character called Satine, and I was really happy with the theme that I came up with for her. And then probably my favorite episode is that one that you played that little cue in your montage, and that's when Ahsoka makes her decision to leave, and we did a lot of that in Prague with a big orchestra, all that Ahsoka arc. And that's probably my favorite 3 or 4 episodes, the final Ahsoka arc.
That's great, yeah, definitely. My fourth question, what can we expect from your scores for the upcoming Star Wars Rebels animated series?
Well, it's kind of a cool reboot. I'm sure if you've seen any interviews with Dave Filoni or even myself, Dave's really talking about going back to A New Hope, going back to the adventure kind of serialized feel that the first film had, and the musical sensibility is a lot closer to what John did for that film specifically, A New Hope, than what we were doing on Clone Wars. And George specifically didn't want me to do, I mentioned that he liked CSI Miami. He also liked a lot of ethnic sounds. I mentioned the Rhodia episode, where we had a Bulgarian women's choir. So he really wanted to experiment, and so did I, with ethnicities and different kind of world elements in Clone Wars. And now I think we've done a lot of that. I mean, we did, 200 episodes. I probably have almost 100 hours of music I did in that vein. So I think it's time to explore something else. And it winds up being going back to the roots of Star Wars and to the sensibility that John had when he scored the very first, which is different than his sensibility for the prequels. And so I really, really kind of tried to adhere to the sound and that he had for A New Hope, and that's really what you're going to hear in Star Wars Rebels. It's really super, super Star Wars-y in the sense of the first one or two features.
That's great. Yeah, very exciting. My final question, do you have any upcoming composing jobs other than Rebels or other projects you'd like to talk about?
You know, I'm still working on Hell on Wheels, which is very, very different. It's a Western for AMC, and I play everything on Hell on Wheels. It's all stringed instruments. As I mentioned, I'm a guitarist. But I'm playing cello, I'm playing harmonium, I'm playing all these weird Turkish instruments called like a tambour, I'm playing an oud, I'm playing some ethnic drums, and I'm doing it, it's all real, there's no synthesizers in this show, and so it's super different where Rebels is really orchestral, really has a sense of classicism the way John did it, and the way I'm doing Rebels. Hell on Wheels is completely 180 degrees different, where maybe one piece of music is only a mandolin or a mandola. You know, I'm using, it's a little lower strung than a mandolin. It's like a viola, except it's a mandola. You know, it's not bowed. It's plucked with a pick. So I really dig that show. I really dig them. It's really refreshing to go from an orchestra to just me and a stringed instrument in Hell on Wheels.
That's very cool, very nice. So thank you, Kevin, for answering all of my questions. I'll let my co-host Ruan ask his now.
All right. My first question for you, Kevin, is, what was it like working on a show as big as the Clone Wars, and how has working on that particular show changed the way you compose your music in the future?
Wow, that's pretty deep. It's, you know, I've said in interviews in the past, you know, that could be a really scary experience, especially for someone like myself. I'm such a huge Star Wars fan, and it's interesting. So much of the staff who works on now Rebels and also who worked on Clone Wars, they're huge Star Wars fan. I think you'd probably know Dave Filoni dressed up like Plo Koon early in his, you know, when he was 19, 20 years old, whatever, you know, and went to the midnight screenings. I myself went to all the midnight screenings of all the films, except for A New Hope. I don't think had a midnight screening, but I went to all the others. So you put me in a room with George Lucas for the first time, and I have a shot at scoring that, and then he tells me that he wants me to rearrange, you know, the Star Wars theme, because I'm like, wait, it's really good already. I don't want to goof it up. And I think I made the comment to him. I said, you know, John did this right the first time, and he's like, no, but I want big drums and, you know, or something different, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, you either have an opportunity just to kind of be so afraid and freak out, or embrace it, you know. And fortunately, I embraced it. Yeah, I think you know, I'm a sports fan, and you hear interviews, say somebody before a big football match or somebody before a basketball game or a baseball game, you know, in the World Series, and they ask them, are you nervous? And the guys say, no, I'm not nervous. I'm just really amped up. I'm just really excited. I can't wait to get out there. And that's how I felt. I wasn't nervous. You know, I wasn't scared. I was definitely, it got my attention. You know, I was definitely really excited, but, you know, I had enough confidence. I think that I felt I was up to the task, and fortunately, I think it turned out pretty good. So I'm really thankful for that I didn't freak out, because I think that could have happened.
Yeah, definitely. Well, my next question for you is, what was the direction process like when working on the music for the Clone Wars? I mean, did Dave give you any particular musical insight or direction when composing an episode, or were you pretty free to work as you wished?
No, initially both George and Dave had really specific ideas about what they wanted, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. And I would fly up to Skywalker with several versions of a scene. Say, somebody would like mention, hey, I really like this tune by whatever, or I really like this sound. Can we try scoring this scene in that vein? So I would do that, and then I could usually tell, well, that's not going to work, and it's really cool to experiment, but sometimes it doesn't work, and
Yeah.
so when I saw that it wasn't working, I would score it the way I thought it should be. And I would bring that, I would sort of have that in my hip pocket, and then so we'd go through a playthrough and everybody kind of be looking around, and I'd say, here, why don't we listen to this version? Because I think this might be a little more the direction we should go. So sometimes it worked that way. Other times, Dave had really great, like, say, Plo Koon is a Jedi master who's really close to Dave's heart, and he wanted him to be Russian. He wanted him to have a Russian sound. So we got kind of a Russian sounding choir happening, and harmonically I studied a bunch of Russian music and just tried to get that vibe happening. And Dave would throw me things maybe from other films sometimes. I think you're aware that the temp track is a pervasive part of our working environment as film composers. Do you know about that?
I do not actually know.
Well, it's called a temp track, and almost always these days, when you go to score a movie, somebody has already put a bunch of soundtracks on that movie. They've pulled cues from all over the place that they think helps move it along, and George did that with A New Hope. I mean, I personally know quite a few of the pieces of music that John had to listen to, before he scored A New Hope, and what it does is it's very difficult for a director to communicate in musical terms. They're not musicians,
Yeah.
so it kind of gives you a jumping off point where you can say, okay, so say Dave had something from, I don't even know what, say it was from Indiana Jones or something like that, and and so I'm watching, and it's an action scene, and he's got this music, and so we would talk about it, and we'd say, well, look, I think the tempo is really good, and kind of the spirit of it's really great, but I don't think these kind of things are what our show wants to say, and so we would talk, and it gives you a really good way of talking about music, because it's a very difficult thing to put music into words, So you can play that Indiana Jones piece of music and say, hey, I really like those drums, or I really like what the strings, or I really like those trumpets. So that's cool. You can use those elements and maybe the tempo or the kind of feel that they're going for, because that's a director giving you really good direction of what he wants from a scene. And in the best case, you wind up being creative, and putting your own stamp on it. And the director also has his stamp, because he has his tempo, he has his feeling. Maybe he has his little trumpet kind of feeling that he was going for. So you put that into the cue. But it's also, for me, it's my piece of music. It's not just an Indiana Jones ripoff. What can happen in the worst cases is that the director, and this never happened with Dave or George, but in the worst cases, the director gets so married to the temp track that you have to almost, rip it off to the point where, lawsuits have happened.
Yeah.
There's Hans Zimmer, there's people who've been, had to, that have come too close. Hans, I think it was pretty famous, is something from Holst the Planets, and he got sued by by the estate of Gustav Holst for coming too close to that piece of music. It was Mars, I think, in Gladiator.
But yeah, I can kind of relate to that because my brother, he's making a short film now for a film festival, and he just found out like a week ago that he can't use any copyrighted music, so his music has to be completely composed on his own. Right. And I'm the only musician he knows, so now he's wanting me to compose an entire soundtrack just for a 3-minute film that's due next week. So I'm having to wrestle together something that sounds like what he wants as the director, and it's really confusing having your vision with theirs and still trying to put something together that it's kind of both. And so yeah, it's really fascinating that you say that.
Yeah, no, you've got a tough job because he thought he was going to use these things, and now he's got to like, man, that's hard, you know, because he probably really likes those tunes, and you know, that's tough.
It is. It's very tough. They have a very clear vision in mind, but it's our job to try and master that, I guess. Yeah. But my next question for you is, which The Clone Wars episode, if you can remember, was your favorite to work on? And which episode is your favorite in general?
Yeah, it's just so hard. I mean, I think for Rory, I answered that with, you know, I love the feature. I love the music I did for the feature. I'm very proud of that. I love the Ahsoka arc. I really like the themes I wrote for Satine and for the clones, for Plo Koon. Oh, I forgot all about Darth Maul and that stuff. That's awesome too. I mean, man, there's so much. You know, I probably should put a list, but if I put a list together, it would probably have 10 shows in it, at least 10 or 12 episodes that were my favorites, and I really could not pick one favorite. You know, everybody seems to really like that cue at the end of the Ahsoka arc in season 5, and I played the bass recorder at the very end. We didn't use the regular end credits and stuff, and it's also a very emotional. It's just a very emotional piece of music. It's a very emotional scene. So if I had to pick like one scene, it might be that, but there's a ton of action scenes that I really loved also. You know, there's these buzz droids that are happening, I think, in the first episode of the Ahsoka arc in season 5. That's a really fun piece of music. So I kind of gravitate, I guess, you know, I'm sort of answering your questions less about which episodes I like and more about which pieces of music I like, you know.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
So
all the same.
I guess I'm a little biased that way. I've got kind of less story centric and more music centric. It's all one big music video to me, man.
I can imagine. I mean, you've been doing this for how many years now? Would that be 6 since the Clone Wars came out?
Yeah, I think they gave us jackets about a few months ago at a big kind of ending party, and
oh yes, I remember seeing.
I think the date on my jacket is 2006 or something. Dang, now I forget.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You know, George hadn't even sold the show. I think you know, he's so cool. He's just like, hey, we're gonna do this. I think we did like 20 episodes before he even went out and tried to sell the show. I'm not sure. It was so cool. I'm like, hey, when's it gonna air? And Dave's like, we don't even have a network yet.
They were very confident. That's always a good thing.
You know what? It's Star Wars, dude.
Well, my last question for you, Kevin, is when working on something as big as Star Wars, I mean, I can imagine, did you ever not know how to compose a particular scene, or were there any scenes that you had trouble composing?
You know, looking back, I really struggled with Darth Maul, just because he was a really big deal. You know, to me it was super important to give him something iconic, and it just took a while to figure out how to approach him and what his sound was going to be. And initially, I think I didn't want to use choir, because I'd been using kind of a bunch of choir, and I kind of wanted to stop doing that for a little bit. But I maybe that was my biggest problem, because it really he's you have to have a choir with him almost, and so I think by avoiding it, I just caused myself more work, and finally I figured it out.
Yeah. Well, I've got to say, my favorite personal theme would be like you said, the Darth Maul theme, and I believe it was the Boba Fett theme. Always stands out to me as something like that could be my ringtone forever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one, I love that theme, and also Ventress's theme. Those are some of my favorites.
Yeah, I forgot all about Ventress. That's a
lot to remember.
fun one. And by the way, Dave Filoni had a lot of input in that Ventress theme too. So you're talking about working together and stuff. You know, he gave me some really good ideas.
One thing that actually came to my mind that I was just thinking of earlier today and just kind of realized how much I loved it was one from Carnage of Krell, the last of the Umbrella episodes. That, you know, the execution scene, or well, the execution that didn't happen, of course, with Fives and Jesse. You remember that theme? That was really good. I really love that theme.
Yeah, I forgot all about that too.
Yeah, that one was so cool. Yeah, that was a favorite of mine for a long time. So
right,
yeah,
I gotta go check that out again now.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for answering my questions. It's been very informative and helpful now that the new thing I'm doing now. But thank you.
Yeah, well, you're not gonna sleep for a week or so that's cool.
Oh, I haven't been at all. Now it's another week of no sleep. So.
All right.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
I'm gonna go over the Ruari now. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you as well. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah. Bye. So that was a great interview we had with Kevin, wouldn't you say?
Great.
Yeah. Even though you won't be able to sleep for a week, but oh well.
I know. I have to actually go work on that now because he wants to hear what I have tonight, and I kind of don't have anything.
Well, at least you have an excuse. You were recording an interview with the composer.
Exactly. What can he say?
Well, how about we wrap up the show? That's what I'll say.
All right.
Yeah. So make sure to check out our YouTube channels. The podcast is www.youtube.com/users/everythinggeekcast. Mine is www.youtube.com/users/separatist-destroyers. Lawron's is www.youtube.com/users/starlegend9595. Check out Kevin Kiner's website, www.kevinkiner.com. And check out Channel 113 Podcast Live from www.channel113.com. So geeks out, everyone.